One question that has arisen that I think a lot of people have been talking about is, if you look at both Kevin Lee and Darren Till, both of them are like relatively young within the sport of MMA. I mean, I think they're both of them are like 28 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, at the age of 28, they've reached such a high profile in one of the premier fighting organizations in the world, in the UFC. But at this point in time, a lot of people are saying that their careers are somewhat finished. Now, Kevin Lee is obviously coming off several losses. To be fair to Kevin Lee's competed on the highest level. Like, he's competed on the level of like fighting the likes of a prime Tony Ferguson. He obviously lost to Charles Oliveira, and Charles Oliveira has gone on to pick up a title. I mean, obviously his latest loss was against a guy that's not as good as he is in terms of pedigree, in terms of like what he's accomplished, but he's a fighter that's had a bit of hype, and he did have a bit of a record going into the fight. And on top of that, he was way bigger than Kevin Lee as well. So like, if you take that all into account, I mean, Kevin Lee has lost to really good fighters. I mean, he's lost to like really, really good fighters, like the likes of obviously a prime Tony Ferguson and all these other top fighters. But at the same time, I mean, it seems like despite his physical talent, his career seems to be over. I mean, he's coming off several losses. He doesn't look as impressive as he once did. The thing about Kevin Lee is one of them fighters that when you put him in there with fighters that are not quite elite, but they're good fighters, but they're a little bit lower down, like they've not probably fought the level of opposition he has, and they're usually around the same size as he is, he looks absolutely phenomenal against them. I mean, look at what he done to Gregory Gillespie. He completely knocked him out in that one fight. I mean, it's quite impressive what he did. And he looks phenomenal against these fighters that are like of that level, of that type of caliber. But when you put him in there with other fighters that are not of an elite level or higher than that, he just doesn't look as impressive. For whatever reason, he's one of them fighters that he just doesn't perform at the highest level despite his physical talent. Now, if you look at Darren Till has followed a similar pattern to Kevin Lee. Like, there was a lot of hype for him when he first got into the actual sport. I mean, I think he did have like Dana White privilege in a sense. I mean, the UFC was looking at him like he was going to be like the Liverpool's answer to like Conor McGregor. He can speak well. He had a lot of charisma. He seemed like a good guy. Like, a lot of people liked him. He had a bit of a following. I mean, they done an event in Liverpool just to I think when he fought Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, they literally done an event in Liverpool just to like put him on, put hype behind his name, and he did have a bit of hype behind his name. But then obviously, like, he started taking losses. When he losing to like a prime Tyron Woodley, there's nothing to be ashamed of there. But then when he lost to Masvidal, who at the time Masvidal was at the start of his tear, where he was about to beat the likes of Nate Diaz and all these great fighters. But when he lost to Masvidal, and to be fair, he did drop Masvidal, but then Masvidal came back and knocked him out. I mean, that was a beginning of the slide for him. And then he started losing. Obviously, his latest loss was against Derek Brunson. Derek Brunson is a very good fighter. He's a veteran that's been around for a long time, but he's 37 years old. So, like, you'd expect a fighter of the talent and the caliber of Darren Till, who's getting the hype that he's getting, to actually beat a fight like that. But then we saw what actually happened. So, in my opinion, both fighters are they kind of got thrown to the wolves early in their career. And I've noticed that with the UFC, unless you're a real good cash cow like a McGregor, and even McGregor got thrown to the wolves. I mean, if you look at McGregor's resume, I mean, he had to take really hard fights to get into the position that he got into. But if you look at these fighters, usually they get thrown into the wolves really early. I mean, Kevin Lee didn't really get a chance to build his career. Darren Till, I mean, they're already putting him in there with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who was at the time was a very good fighter. I mean, they don't give them time to actually build their career. They throw them in there with the wolves, and then they're forced to sink or swim. And unfortunately, a lot of them sink. A lot of them don't swim. So yeah, that's my opinion. I think the reason why both Kevin Lee and Darren Till's career is considered finished now at a high level is because they got thrown to the wolves early. I just feel like they never had the time to really develop their skills over time. And I found with the matchmaking with the UFC, because it's such an elite organization, they're trying to put you in there with really high level opposition, but they do it really early in your career when you might not be ready. But on top of that, when you're taking comeback fights, they never let you find your level. So for example, with Kevin Lee would go in there against fighters on paper that were levels below him, and he'll look phenomenal. But then they put him in there with someone who's elite, and then he'll look mediocre at best. But they never let him take that mid-level opposition who's not as bad as the opponents that he beat easily, but not as good as the elite fighters that he's losing to. So he's not given time to really build his career, and I think it's the same with Darren Till. Like, if he's not in there with like a Tyron Woodley and the likes of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, he's in there with, no disrespect to him, but a Donald Cerrone who's undersized and at welterweight, and he looks phenomenal against Donald Cerrone. But when he's in there with an elite fighter, he doesn't look as good anymore. So yeah, I feel like it's a strategy of the UFC to some extent is good, because it gives us like the fights that we want to see immediately. But to a managerial perspective of actually managing a career, it's not as good. Seeing a fighter put in there so early in his career against top level opposition, it doesn't give them a time to actually build their career, and because of that, they start taking L's, they start taking losses. They don't look as impressive as they once did. So yeah, in my opinion, the reason why Darren Till and Kevin Lee's career has not been the same is because they started taking L's. They started taking fights against fighters that are just levels above them, and they've not really built up their career to get to that position. So they're immediately, in a sense, thrown to the wolves. And it's the thing that makes the UFC like the top premier organization in the world, that they give the fans fights that we want to see. But at the same time, they need to learn to sort of have that balance between building their stars and also giving us the fights we want to see, because it's not always good to put your fighters in there with the top level opposition. Like, you should take your time and build your stars sometimes. But the problem is with the UFC that they don't tend to do that. They tend to like just throw you in there with the wolves immediately. So yeah, that's my opinion on why I think Kevin Lee and Darren Till's career have gone the way it's gone. It's a wide reason, but the main reason is because I feel like the UFC have, although they marketed them and made them popular, they didn't give them a chance to actually develop their career. They put them in there with high level opposition very early, without giving them the good step up fights they need to actually fight on that level of opposition, and they managed to get too much hype too early as well. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with Paddy Pimblington, who actually fought on the same card, who's from Liverpool, just like Darren Till is. Are they going to put him in there with high level opposition immediately to justify the hype that's around him, or are they going to take their time with him and actually build a star slowly but surely, and give him the right step up fights at the right time to actually show his true level and show where he's at? It remains to be seen. So yeah, that's my opinion on why I think Darren Till and Kevin Lee's career is considered finished at the top level, and why they've kind of peaked early at the age of 28. Neither of them seem as good as, like, they seem like their careers finished at this point, at this elite level with the UFC. So yeah, that's my opinion. Tell me your opinion below, and like and subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot more content coming your way. Peace out.